What has happened, everybody? James Hancock here. I'm back with a spoiler-free review of Gran Turismo, which has had its U.S. release postponed until August 25th. However, it's already playing in some IMAX early access screenings, and it feels a little weird saying that this is a spoiler-free review and that it's based on the true story of Jan Mardenborough, an avid player of the racing simulator Gran Turismo, who eventually became a professional race car driver. It's a little bit like the 80s sci-fi flick The Last Starfighter, but it really happened. Back in 2011, he won the Gran Turismo Academy competition where they taught gamers how to race for real, and in a short time he was competing in things like Le Mans. But in the movie, Jan is played by Archie Madekwe, and he's coached and trained by a character played by David Harbour. And in the director's chair, we have Neil Blomkamp, who back in 2009, he was basically hailed as the next great visionary director of science fiction due to his movie District 9, but I feel like in like the 14-15 year interim since then, he's kind of struggled to live up to everyone's lofty expectations. So quick side note, I've been sick as a dog for the last few days, so I'm more or less reading my notes for this review because when I'm feeling feverish, my brain tends to go in all directions at once. And as long as I'm making confessions, I should also admit my personal bias. This film is a PlayStation production distributed by Sony, and I'm rooting hard for all video game adaptations to succeed. I feel like there are thousands of games out there that could be a real shot in the arm for the movie biz as movie adaptations, so I'm hoping this movie makes piles of money leading to many more PlayStation productions down the road. That said, I have some pretty severe criticisms of the movie, which I'll be getting to shortly, but let's start with the positive. Gran Turismo is better than your average video game adaptation. I'm talking about movies like Assassin's Creed, which are best left forgotten. But because of the recent success of shows like The Last of Us or movies like Super Mario Bros., it's easy to forget just how horrible most movie adaptations of video games tend to be. But Gran Turismo, it's more or less fine. It's like a paint-by-numbers, inspirational tale of a young dreamer who gets a shot to make the jump from the gaming console to sitting in the seat of an actual race car. And I'm not going to claim that it's the next inspirational story like Rocky, but it doesn't completely fall on its face either like so many of its predecessors. And the movie's a pretty good showcase for the talents of Neil Blomkamp, who gets multiple opportunities to show us that he still got it as a director, specifically during the racing sequences. What's cool is how he gives us these kind of hybrid perspectives where we get so many interesting details from the racing simulator mixed in with real life, constantly reminding us of the thousands of hours that Jan has raced these tracks in a virtual environment. And there are some insanely hardcore sequences where we're reminded that there's quite a bit of difference between a simulator and real life, where we have actual real life or death stakes as some horrible accidents inevitably occur. Because in real life, racers can catch on fire. They can fucking die. Like, even the audience can be in danger sometimes at these races. So I recommend people hunt this movie down on the biggest IMAX screen you can find, because I felt like while watching this in IMAX, I really got my money's worth. But best of all in this movie is David Harbour, who really gives this movie his all. He gives the gamers in the movie some much-needed tough love as he prepares them for the reality of basically sitting in a rocket, going hundreds of miles an hour, being forced to make split-second decisions that can mean life or death for them or the racers next to them. But David Harbour's a bit of a double-edged sword because he's acting opposite an actor that I would describe kindly as inexperienced, but the lead has a very limited range, which gives the movie kind of a lopsided dramatic effect in the scenes between these two actors, which leads me to my criticisms. While Archie Madekwe, he's acted in a lot of movies. He's in the new movie Heart of Stone, he was in Beau is Afraid, he was in Midsommar, so he's not green, he's just wooden. Like in this movie, he cannot emote at all. He has one stone-faced expression which he uses for every single emotion that the character experiences, whether he's fighting with his father or falling in love for the first time or getting the chance to live his dream. And I'm kind of overstating the case. Obviously, he's capable of doing more than just, but it seems like he has this kind of default expression that he uses for nearly every single scene. And I would say he's not up to the task of carrying the weight of this entire movie. And what compounds the problem is that in all the racing sequences, he's wearing a helmet which covers up his entire face except for his eyes. So he and all of his fellow racers, they need to be able to communicate volumes just with their eyes. And some of the racers are up to the task, but I would say that Archie is not. And when you see him in pictures at the end of the movie, the real-life Jan has far more personality, far more charisma. Like, the charisma just comes off of him in waves. But I should mention that the real-life Jan did do a lot of the stunt driving for the movie, but it's just a shame that they couldn't find an actor that would do a better job of bringing his story to life. And who knows, maybe Jan is too old at this point to play the part, but perhaps they should have just cast Jan in the part. But another major problem with this movie is the screenplay, and right in the middle of this giant debate about the uses and applications of artificial intelligence in entertainment, This movie feels like it was cranked up by a program engineered to create the most generic, bland, kind of inspirational but mostly inoffensive story imaginable, with the occasional manufactured tension provided by Orlando Bloom's character. And Jimon Hansu, who's an incredible actor who plays Jan's father, I just feel like he deserved much better material, although I should admit, he does manage to provide one great laugh-out-loud moment talking shit about PlayStation. But the movie is also way too long at 2 hours and 15 minutes. It seriously wears out its welcome and could have played much better with a lean and mean 90-minute runtime. And I heard a theory recently that one of the reasons that a lot of movies have longer and longer runtimes is that when they're playing on all these streaming services, it improves their stats when it comes to total minutes viewed. And so a lot of movies are erring on the side of being longer. I'm like, you know what actually would help out your movie a lot more? Being a good movie. Like, don't make your movie overly long because you're trying to hack your stats on Nielsen ratings or whatever the case might be. In the end, a great movie-going experience is the best weapon in your arsenal. And also, keep in mind that the audience for this movie, or a large part of the audience for this movie, they're gamers. They'd rather be gaming. They're used to being in the driver's seat. They're used to being riveted every single second by their content, so you better keep these gamers entertained or they're gone. But in spite of my criticisms of the movie, I should mention that there was one couple in my theater that was having the time of their lives, and they were basically screaming with joy the entire movie. However, I should also mention they were also screaming with joy throughout all the trailers as well, so I think this is just a couple where they are very easily entertained. And when I think about the racing movies of the past, I don't think Gran Turismo compares all that favorably. Like James Mangold's Ford v Ferrari in 2019. I saw that movie twice. I thought it was vastly superior. Hell, even like Talladega Nights and Days of Thunder are better. But perhaps the best racing movie that I've ever seen is the 2010 documentary Senna, about the legendary Ayrton Senna. And if you look at that poster, you can see what I'm talking about when it comes to communicating volumes with the eyes. And as I was watching Gran Turismo, I was thinking to myself, maybe it would have been cooler if they just made an amazing documentary about the game or the simulator, whatever you want to call it, and the true life story of Jan Mardenberg, because then you could have used the actual real footage, you could have used footage from the game. I think a documentary might have been a better way to go. In any event, should you spend your money on this flick? I suspect that racing fans would rather watch real life racing, and I suspect that gamers would rather be gaming. But if you really like Neil Blomkamp and you want to see him thrive, pay to see it in IMAX. His career could use a bump. Otherwise, I can't claim that you're missing much. I wish I had a more favorable review to share, but no matter how thrilling the racing sequences might be, if you have a lead who can't act, delivering lines from a screenplay that's uninspired and probably needed many more drafts or just a much better writer, period, well then you've got a problem, especially after 2 hours and 15 minutes. But I'll be curious to see what PlayStation has in store for us down the road. I will continue to support PlayStation productions. But for me, the real creative problem with any game adaptation is, can you make a movie that's more fun to watch for 2 hours than it is to actually play the game for 2 hours? Because if you're adapting a great game, chances are it's fun as fucking shit to play that game for a couple hours. So from the word go, you have a very tough act to follow. And so I think that's going to be the real riddle for gaming adaptations moving forward. How do you make seeing a game adaptation, whether it's a film or a show, like, how do you make it so dramatically compelling that people will put aside the console or their PC for a couple hours to watch your show or movie? And I feel like there are a few examples, like the Castlevania show on Netflix managed to pull it off. So it's not impossible, but it's definitely an interesting creative challenge moving forward. But at this point, I think I've said all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed this review. If so, please consider hitting that notification bell to be notified about future content, and hunt me down on Twitter at Colbrax. But thanks again for watching, but more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.